Dear viewer, welcome back to our program, Hosanna. In our program, we're handling the book of Daniel. And with me is my guest, Dr. Boutros. Dr. Boutros, how are you?
I'm good, Miriam. How are you doing?
Very good. You're going to walk us through chapter 5, the continuation of chapter 5 today. Last time you talked to us about the writing on the wall. And you're going to walk us through it to give us a recap and talk to us a little bit more.
So this King Belshazzar is having this great party with lots of dancing and ungodliness and drunkenness. And during that party, as you see in the picture before you, you see his fingers of a human hand and writes on the wall, and that looked very, very scary and something he's never has seen before. And he was so shaky and sweaty and pale. Verse 7 is where we stopped, and we will continue. The king called out for all the people of wisdom in that time. Again, they are titled as enchanters, astrologers, diviners, to be brought, and said to them, the Bible, whose reading is on this wall? And tell me what it means, and if you do that, you're going to be handsomely rewarded. You'll be clothed with purple and have a gold chain placed around your neck, and you will be made the third highest in the kingdom. Third highest, that's after his grandfather and his father, and then he will take a place equal to himself in the kingdom, the third highest. We read in verse 8 that, of course, no one would know, because this wisdom is coming, because this is from God, and you need godly wisdom to explain this. Then all the king's wise men came in, but the Bible tells us they could not explain or read the writing on the wall. They were not able to. So King Belshazzar became even more terrified. So this is a story of a king who has everything, but something small scares him. Why? Because he is living away from God. He's living a worldly, secular life. And things scare people. But people of God, if you are really the Son of God, although things will hit hard around you, if your house is built on the rock, it will sustain and it will not fall down. King.
What I like about this story so far is the contrast between a very defiant, arrogant king who wanted to look God in the eye and defy him. But when God, a finger started drawing, just a small snap of God terrified him. And that's what really touches me about this story.
Yes, Mariam, that's so true. People in the world who are away from God, they are not living at peace. Anything, they snap right away. They fight, they bicker, broken relationship, running away from home. It's just very vulnerable. But with God, if God is in the house, your house will be a peaceful, a quiet house, and storms will hit. But you will see that it doesn't shake you from the inside and terrify you like this king. So King Belshazzar became more terrified, and his face grew more pale, and his nobles were baffled. Up until then, the king and his wise men are taking charge. But starting from verse 10, my beloved, we're introduced to someone new on the block. This person is the queen of the palace. And in that time, Miriam, the queen was not the king's wife. It is the king's mother, or sometimes it is the king's grandmother. The queen could be his mother or his grandmother. It could be very well that she is King Nebuchadnezzar's wife. The queen, hearing the voice of the king and his nobles, came into the banquet hall. You see, this woman is very, very wise. She separated herself from such a party. She said, no, this is a party where maybe some ungodliness will take place. I will not take part of it. And it's important for us as God's people to have that separation, to live in the world but not let the world live in us. To live in the world but not let the world live in us. In book of Proverbs 18 verse, sorry, in the book of Revelation chapter 18 and verse 14, we read this. A voice from heaven is saying, "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues." You may be at a situation now where you're sharing in the sin of others, and you are suffering from the plague of sin with others. It is an invitation where God is pointing His hand at you and telling you, come out of it. Come out and separate yourself from that, whatever it is, that relationship, that location, that friendship, that whatever it is that God is calling you to come out from and separate yourself, just like this queen. She came into the banquet hall and she said, "O King, live forever. Do not be alarmed. Do not look so pale." And she reminds him of someone special in his life. There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods on him. What a great testimony. I wonder what people would talk about us, Miriam, when they see us. Do they say that this is a woman of God? This is a man of God who has God's spirit on him? Or would they sometimes look to God's people and say, "You are not different from the rest"?
And she remembers. So he must have really struck her as being very special. So even that recall memory that he left in her was long-lasting.
Very correct, Mary. There is this man in your kingdom, and she reminds him, in your time of your father, here it is, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. It's the best she could tell, according to her limited knowledge of God. This is a great testimony. And she tells him, "King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, I say, appointed him chief." So Daniel was the chief. And to that much was an elevation of God's people. Chief of the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. This man, and she gives his name here, Daniel, whom the king called Belteshazzar with a T, was found to have a keen mind and knowledge and understanding, and also the ability to explain dreams and to solve problems. And she gives him good advice. Call on Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means. Again, we're reminded here to give good advice to people. Call on Daniel, a godly man. If you're giving advice, call on someone who is godly. And make sure that the advice you're receiving is a godly and a Christian advice, Miriam.
So, Dr. Botros, tell us what happens. Does Daniel go to the king at this point? What happens with the king?
Very good. So in verse 13 we read that Daniel was brought before the king. And this is the third time Daniel was brought before against his grandfather King Nebuchadnezzar, when he wanted to kill everyone and he told him, "I can tell the dream." He was brought again before the king for the second time when he was asking for the interpretation of the dream of the tree. And here we see Daniel brought for the third time before the king to give him an interpretation for the writing on the wall. It's amazing how this young king, King Belshazzar, who loved to party, had no clue that Daniel was present in his life, in his kingdom. Sometimes we have godly people around us, a friend, a neighbor, someone at work, someone in your church, and you have no idea that you are surrounded by godly men and women, and you never make use of them until they are out of your life. They may travel to heaven, they may travel away, and then you've lost the chance. Why? Why do we sometimes run after friends who really don't care about us? And the friends that really care about us and want our best interest are the ones we turn our back on and we don't run after. I would love for God's people really to look up for each other and to know where God's people are here or there. So Daniel was brought before the king for the third time, and the king told him, "Are you Daniel?" He didn't recognize him. You see, to that extent, the king was unaware. Unlike King Nebuchadnezzar, his father, he knew who Daniel was. And he recognized him, and he honored him, and he put him in a high position. This king didn't even know that Daniel existed. Are you, Daniel, one of the exiles? Look at the language he speaks about. Are you, Daniel, one of the exiles? It's like an insult. Instead of giving him honor, are you, Daniel, one of the exiles? My father, the king, brought from Judah. I have heard that the Spirit of God is in you. And in verse 15, he tells him, the wise men could not interpret the writing on the wall. They can read it, but cannot explain it. And that is an example of earthly wisdom. Earthly wisdom cannot explain things. It cannot tell you how to live a Christian life. You need wisdom from God. And the beautiful thing is that God says, if you ask for wisdom from heaven, I will give it to you. There was a man who once asked for wisdom from God. He could have asked for power. He could have asked for finances. He could have asked to be rich. But he left all this and he said, I want you, O God, to give me wisdom. And God gave him wisdom and everything else. And that man, of course, is King Solomon.
So Dr. Boutros, in closing of this episode, what are some key things you want our viewers to take away from this?
Well, number one, we have to separate ourselves from sin. Separate yourself and live differently. Avulse yourself from that life. The life of sin, you have to take action. Don't say, oh, my parents can't help me, my friends can't help me, my abuna and pastor cannot help me. Sometimes, no, you have to do it yourself. And with God's help, you will be able to do it. If you ask for it, this is a prayer that is close to His heart. Separate yourself from sin. Number two, beware of the godly people around you and make friends with them and speak with them and learn from them and bounce ideas with them. And last but not least, do not talk to people badly and do not demean people around you.
Thank you, Dr. Boutros. And my dear viewer, remember, God is talking to you today to avulse yourself from sin, as we heard. Remember the sin of pride, and remember the sin of trying to defy God. Don't fall into it. My dear viewer, we look forward to having you again with us to continue this exciting chapter of Daniel, chapter 5, and see what happens. What will happen to that king? Will he learn from his father, or will he fall, is what we're going to find out next time. And Dr. Boutros, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Remember to follow us on Facebook. And if you have any questions, email Dr. Boutros at hosanna@smsv.ca. Thank you.